When you think of horror games, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Maybe FNAF, Poppy Playtime, or maybe even Baldi? However, in terms of horror, these games aren't scary, or at least usually. Sure, a monster or animatronic may sneak up behind you and scare you because you weren't paying attention. Heck, even your math teacher could make you shiver your timbers. But that's beside the point. That begs the question, is there any game that's actually scary? Let me introduce you to Rooms and Doors. Before I talk about today's topic, it is important that you know some of the lore and the context that surrounds this game. Rooms and Doors is a remake of the original Rooms, bringing new ideas to the table while also expanding on existing ones. After paying a coin to Charon, he sends you in a boat to the underworld, or at least the entrance of it, which is what we see in the opening cutscene. It is confirmed that the first 100 rooms still take place in the overworld. After A-101, all new entities you encounter come straight from the underworld. All entities add in some way to the horror of this game, although I will only talk about a few ones and how they work. A60 will play solo static when he spawns, and the noise he makes will increase the closer he is to you. A60 makes you paranoid, which adds to the horror since the audio cues he plays can blend in with the ambient and the sounds you make when you walk. This means that you will always have to keep an ear out for his audio cues. A60 Prime will have a chance to spawn after A60 after reaching A50. He will flicker your flashlight to warn of his attack. It is important to note that A60 Prime will never spawn before an A60 attack. A60 Prime adds to the horror by making you stressed after an A60 attack, since you know that there's a chance he decides to attack. A40 will have a chance to spawn in lockers. When he spawns, you will hear a locker closing. If you decide to interact with this locker, he will scare you away and leave. You will be unable to enter the locker for a couple of seconds. A40 adds to the horror by surprising you when you least expect it and making you panic, since you normally encounter him when you're trying to hide from an entity. This makes you always check for A40 when an entity is coming, which adds to the tension of the game. A200 will turn your screen gray and he will remove all ambient sound effects. He'll make a big thud when he spawns. By this point, you should find a locker and wait for him to despawn. When A200 passes through your locker, he'll make an audio cue of a person exhaling. A200 adds to horror by being mostly silent, since you only know where he is when he passes through your locker, which gives you a sense of doubt on when he despawns or where he is. That's all the entities I wanted to talk about. Like I said before, all entities add to the horror to a certain degree, although I only talked about the main ones that do. In Rooms and Doors, there are charms that give your character certain abilities, but they aren't important for today's topic. After knowing the story and how some of the entities make this game scary, let's look at how A-666 executes horror perfectly. After making it all the way to room A-666, surviving all entities in the game, you're greeted with a stairway room. The floor is red, the atmosphere is awfully quiet, and the blood is flooding the room downstairs. A message may appear of your character telling you to keep walking. If you ignore this message, your character will tell you, this room is unsettling. If you ignore this message, another message will appear stating, please do not stay here, of your character begging you to leave the room. If you still decide to ignore this message, a creepy sound will play and your character will say, I don't like the sound of that. If you ignore this message, after a while, you will hear static, red light will fill the room, and you will die with no jump scare. That was A-666, the 9 incomprehensible horrors. This encounter is completely optional. You can just go to the next room to avoid encountering him. Before we talk about why A-666 is scary, let me explain how he works. A-666 is very similar to Haste from Doors. Upon interacting with the computer at A-666, or waiting 15 to 20 seconds in the room, A-666 will spawn very far away from the player, out of bounds, and will slowly approach the player. To be able to survive him, you must rush through the rooms as quickly as possible and hide in lockers whenever he is close. A-666 has 9 faces, which is why he is called the 9 incomprehensible horrors. He will change faces every time he despawns, after you hide from him in a locker. In the first phase, he'll be slow, play a loud sound when near, and he'll be completely visible to the player. From phases 2 to 4, he will have the same behavior as his first phase. However, he'll progressively get faster as you move on from phase to phase. In his 5th phase, he will emit no sound, be visible, and have a medium speed. In phase 6, he will be really fast and will not stop moving when you enter a locker, like he normally does. That doesn't mean that lockers aren't safe, though, and he is still visible. In his 7th phase, he will be quieter than in phase 6, but also slower. In phase 8, he will be quiet, completely invisible, and really fast. If you manage to survive up until here without reaching A699, it's game over. In his 9th phase, he will kill the player no matter what in a 6 to 8 seconds time window. Knowing the fact that you don't have a lot of time to make it to A699, and the fact that you have to hide in lockers wisely, adds perfectly to how the horror is executed in this encounter, and makes the player question if they should risk it and search for a locker in a room ahead, or play it safe and hide in a locker nearby. Those small decisions will determine your fate in the long run. You're probably wondering why I think A666 is scary, and that's because I left out some details on purpose that I will talk about now. For starters, you are unable to sprint when you are walking through the blood, which makes you feel hopeless and defenseless throughout the entire chase sequence. The atmosphere during the chase sequence is really quiet and really tense, only being able to hear the blood while you walk, and sometimes A666. And when you do hear him, oftentimes it is too late to hide. A666 is the only entity which you are able to see through walls, which makes you paranoid, constantly looking for him to see how close he is, and causes you to panic when you don't know where he is. It's important to mention the fact that most charms aren't effective when it comes to encountering A666. The only charm that is slightly effective against him is the charm of Desire, which lets you slam doors even though you can't sprint in this encounter, which just adds to this feeling of helplessness, hopelessness, and defenselessness. You may have noticed by now that A666 is just a black tall square, right? The thing is that it isn't. Your scanner and your mind are unable to comprehend the horrors chasing you down, which is just terrifying to think of. Being chased by something that you can't comprehend, knowing that it's lethal, could make anyone feel shivers down their spine. It is theorized that only the guest is able to see A666, and the one that censors it to prevent you from getting traumatized. Take into account that our runs take place in the TV in which we die, so it would make sense that the guest censors it to prevent us from looking at it. It's also interesting to note that A666 doesn't jump scare you and just kills you upon contact, which challenges most horror games nowadays that just rely on jump scares to be scary. I find it interesting that the badge for surviving A666 says that you evade 9 incomprehensible horrors, not survive, which would be a commonly used term for successfully avoiding an entity attack. According to Google, evade is to escape or avoid due to cleverness or trickery, while surviving is continuing to live or exist despite the danger or hardships. This could imply that even though you physically survived the encounter, a part of you has not survived and has died due to A-666 due to how traumatizing the encounter is to our character even when the 9 incomprehensible horrors are censored. That would be all I wanted to talk about today. I'm really excited to see new boss-like entities being added to this game, since this is the first one that CT4 added, the creator of this game. I really love A666 mechanics and design philosophies, and it just makes me hyped to think about the addition of A300, which is possibly the next entity to be added to Rooms and Doors. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully I'll get to see you guys next time. Get out!